please. Hold, please. Oh, I didn't see you there. Who am I? Well, I'm a hello girl, a female telephone operator. I know, it's a little surprising to see a woman serving in the Army in the Great War. Let me tell you our story. The Great War was a conflict that included many advances, and not just that of technological. This war brought about social changes, economical, political, and military. Women's involvement in the war, from the yeomanettes of the American Navy to the Women's Auxiliary Corps of Britain, gave the ability to show competence in time of war. Women stepped up in many ways, both on the home front and overseas. The women telegraph operators, who worked alongside the U.S. Army Corps, was one of the biggest steps for women's rights in the 20th century. The Hello Girls, as they were coined, served with the military with commendable service and struggled with their own war with Congress until 1979. Americans entered the war fashionably late in April of 1917. The Signal Corps was excited to lay out the new technology since their last conflict, the Spanish-American War. Telephones were a new and upcoming way of communication. It was easier to spread the word and faster than the use of semaphore flags and more reliable than pigeons. Training men to do a job that required multitasking, both French and English languages, and calmness under pressure proved to be harder than thought. Therefore, it fell into women to fill the role. John J. Pershing, the commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, released an order to employ women telephone operators in 1917. On account of great difficulty of obtaining properly qualified men, request organization and dispatch to France force of women telephone operators, all speaking French and English equally well. That was what his order said. Women needed to speak fluent French and English and also be trained in switchboard operations. At first, finding such a niche group was complicated. Eventually, the needs relaxed, and the Army realized that training women to run a switchboard was easier than training a second language. Women came out of the woodwork to sign up. 7,600 AT&T, or Atlantic Telegraph and Telephone employees applied. Throughout the war, the needs relaxed again to not require any French-speaking operators as more and more American lines were laid. The girls were sworn in and told to purchase uniforms, which was unlike the men also serving who were provided uniforms. These uniforms included U.S. military buttons, insignia, and they had to report to the training centers. Thus began the Hello Girls journey, our journey. The question of whether or not women could perform in times of war was a question that floated to the top of many minds during the early 20th century. In fact, it was one of the blocking points of why women could not get the vote passed in Congress. Why would women vote if they would not fight in times or aid in times of war? Nurses had been around for a long time, but they were considered to be feminine angels who could not perform in the front lines. Even the Navy, bringing in the yeomanettes, or yeoman F, were allowed to go over there. John J. Pershing, or Black Jack, was a man who believed strongly in the equality of all people. He coined his nickname from the command of an all-black regiment in the 1890s in the American frontier. Pershing became a strong supporter of women and made sure to mention the women as well as the men when applauding the efforts of the Signal Corps. 332 women joined the fight, 99 of which never made it across the sea. The Hello Girls were organized into 6 units. They ran and organized the switchboards across France from the spring until summer of 1918 and until the end of the war and after. They used the AT&T typical answering script from the home front. The sound of home coming over the lines when the women worked. They spread their work across 75 AEF exchanges throughout France. Some of the women had to work with outdated French equipment, others with AT&T equipment that was voted over. These women even ran the switchboards at the front lines in Pershing's headquarters. The number of telephone calls almost doubled to 70,000 per day from May to October of 1917, as more and more lines were laid by the U.S. Signal Corps. The harder the women had to work. These women handled an average of 2,500 calls a day, many of which connected calls for 12 hours straight on a regular basis. No matter the situation, they got the call through. They were shelled. In even one instance where a fire broke out from German espionage. The 13 operators who were running the lines in the barracks refused to vacate. They were finally forced to leave, but only left for about an hour before they dragged the switchboards from the flames and then set them up elsewhere. Pershing made sure to give the Hello Girls a commemorative booklet on Christmas Day. In 1918, the officers, men, and young women of the Signal Corps have performed their duties with a large conception of the problem, with a devoted and patriotic spirit for which the perfection of our communication daily testify. The proof of women's capabilities were now in print in Pershing's handwriting. The Hello Girls continued working the lines until even after the war in exchanges set up in Germany. It was after the war that their war began. The women returned home to find out that Congress had voted to reduce their status from military to civilian while they were overseas. The women were not eligible for any military benefits. Instead, they were handed contract discharges, even though they had never received a contract from the Army. Bill after bill was submitted to Congress, and every time it was rejected. The girls eventually found Edith Green, a congresswoman from Massachusetts, who began to aid them in their fight. The same congresswoman who had backed the formation of the Women's Army Corps with full benefits of the Army in World War II. The fight raged on. Many of the women gave up or passed away as the years went by. Constant rejections from Congress stating that they would have to give every volunteer that went overseas, such as groups like the Knights of Columbus, which groups like these were not military and usually were volunteers aiding the back lines. It was not until 1978, the last bill requesting benefits and service records submitted to Congress, in a decade of change and growth for women all over the nation, that the world finally started to pay attention. Mark Hugh, an attorney from Seattle, decided to take the case. He received paperwork, booklets, letters, and even a treasured uniform from the ladies still fighting for their benefits. It was the uniform that changed the case. This serge wool navy-colored uniform had U.S. cutout officers' pins, U.S. military blackened Army buttons, and the Signal Corps insignia on the collar. No contract civilian would have worn such a thing. These women were military. Finally, in 1979, Congress declared the Female Telephone Operators Unit a real military unit and sent out honorable discharge papers and victory medals to all who served. Fewer than 20 were still left alive. The Hello Girls who served from 1917 to 1919 in World War I proved themselves beyond a doubt. They did not flee from battle of fire. They did not break under stress. They did not bend or break in the battle that was to follow, a battle fought with the very country in which they served and fought for with honor. One of these women, Grace Banker, was the first female to get awarded the Distinguished Service Medal. We were the first skirted soldiers of the United States, and we always got the message through. Our journey is not one to forget, and I hope you too can connect the lines and get our message through.